Welcome to First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, the birthplace of Congregational Humanism. We carry on that tradition of free thought today, dedicated to promoting a free search for truth, meaning, and justice. Our web address is firstunitarian.org. I'm David Breeden, Senior Minister. Welcome.
Imagine you are in the upper assembly hall of First Unitarian Society this morning. You've searched for and found a place to park, or maybe you walked or biked or arrived via public transportation. You come in and hang up your coat, find your name tag, grab a cup of coffee or tea from the table in the gallery. Perhaps you notice the newly hung art display, and you greet friends, both very young and very old and everywhere in between. You get your order of service and you enter the assembly hall to find your customary seat. Or imagine that you are coming to our mid-century modern building on Mount Curve Avenue for the very first time. You've heard about this place and you imagine there might be a community of like minds where maybe you'll fit in. You were greeted warmly by the folks at the welcome table, and the usher hands you your order of service, and you make your way inside. And as you sit down, maybe up in the balcony or perhaps on the main floor, you take it in, the soaring space, the beautiful wood and perhaps seasonal photos on the stage, our wall of windows and the view of downtown Minneapolis. And as you settle in, you arrive, you breathe in and out. You notice the people. You notice the people who make up this congregation. And together, we wait. Wherever you are this morning, in your living room or kitchen or bedroom, whether you're alone or you're with family and friends, you are welcome here as we create this virtual space together. Wherever we are each other's people. Come. Let us assemble together.
Each week when we gather, we light our chalice and share one of the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism, or one of the aspirations of our congregation. This week we light the chalice remembering the 6th principle, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all.
Now for our congregational covenant. Love is the spirit of this place, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Good morning. I'm Allison Wyeth, Director of Religious Education here at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, and I'm really happy to see you this morning. I want to invite all of our young ones and anyone who loves a good story to gather around and get comfortable for our time for all ages. Today, starting at sundown, begins Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year in Judaism. So we'll be hearing a story today that helps us understand one of its key components, the act of atonement and repentance. Jewish tradition holds that this special day from sundown to sundown the following day is a deeply precious time to ask forgiveness for the wrongs we have committed over the past year. It is a somber day, and those who observe it will typically fast and attend synagogue services. In honor of Yom Kippur and our connections to the Jewish tradition, our story today follows a sweet fellow who learns a bit about the idea of atonement. Adapted from The Hardest Word, a Yom Kippur story. A long, long time ago, the world had many large and fabulous creatures. One of those creatures was a gigantic yellow bird with dark red wings and a purple forehead. He was called the Ziz. One day, the Ziz made a very, very big mistake. It was the week before Yom Kippur when he was flying around his beloved village. He was soaring about, not watching too carefully where he was going, and flew smack into the tallest tree in town. Boom! The tree fell over and knocked into another tree. That tree fell too, and another, and another, and the last one, it fell on the vegetable garden behind the synagogue. "Oh no, not the vegetable garden," cried the Ziz. "It belongs to the children of the village." The Ziz looked at all the damage. The tomatoes, corn, pumpkin, beans, gourds, and squash, all that the children had tended so carefully, were smashed to pulp. The Ziz flew home and sat in his own garden to think. He knew the children grew the vegetables every year to use to decorate their sukkah. That's a hut or tent-like structure meant to symbolize the huts the Israelites dwelt in during their 40 years wandering the desert. But what would the children do this year? Not knowing what to do, the Ziz decided to spread his giant wings and fly to a special spot called Mount Sinai, where he could have a chat with God. "What have you done this time?" asked God, for the Ziz was a frequent visitor seeking advice. "I knocked over a big tree that smashed a garden." "The children's garden?" God questioned. "Yes," the Ziz admitted, hanging his head, "and I don't know what to do to make it better. What should I do?" "I want you to do something for me, and then I will tell you what you should do," replied God. "I want you to search the earth and bring back the hardest word." So the Ziz spread his wings and set off in search. He flew over mountains, trees, valleys, and seas. After searching all day, he stopped to rest. In a little house nearby, he heard a mother and child quarreling about going to bed. "I'm not tired," the little boy cried. "Good night," the mother said firmly, closing his door. "That's it. I found the hardest word," the Ziz exclaimed, and flew as fast as he could to Mount Sinai. He arrived with great excitement and shared the word with God. "I found it. The hardest word is good night. Every child hates that word." "Good night is a hard word for children," God agreed. "But there is another word, even harder. Go and find it." He searched again all day and finally stopped at a huge feast near a castle. He overheard a little girl tell her mother, "I'm hungry. May I please have some paschetti, please?" "Oh," said her mother, "you want spaghetti? Of course, dear." "Ha," thought the Ziz, "found it." And off he flew to tell God. When he arrived, God agreed that spaghetti was indeed a hard word to say. "But," he said, "there is a word still harder." And he sent the Ziz back out to find it. He searched and searched. He brought back words like rhinoceros, ridiculous, and Rumpelstiltskin. Each time God shook his head and sent him back out searching. By the eve of Yom Kippur, the Ziz had brought back over 100 words and been rejected every time. The Ziz was discouraged, but he returned again to Mount Sinai. "What word did you bring?" asked God. "No word," the Ziz answered. "I've come to say I'm sorry. I can't find the hardest word." "You can't?" You're sorry? God asked. Yes, the Ziz answered. I'm sorry. Good job! You found the hardest word of all. Well, each of the words you brought were hard. This one is the very hardest. It's a word you should practice saying often, and one you should always say on Yom Kippur, God explained. Now go, try it out with the children. So the Ziz thanked God for the help and flew back to the village. On his way to meet the children, he stopped in his own garden and gathered a big basket of fruits and vegetables for them. It was time for him to go and say the hardest word. That's a lovely story. It can be hard to say sorry when we make mistakes, but what a wonderful outcome for the children and for the Ziz. So on the eve of this special day, take a moment and quietly reflect on the times and places when you might need to say the hardest word. Who needs to hear it from you so that you can begin again in love?
Son io, mio Carlo, uscir today da questo orrendo veil. Felice ancor io son, se abbracciarti possio, io ti salvai. Convien qui dirci addio. O mio Carlo, per me giunto il dì supremo, non mai più ci rivedremo. Ci congiunga il Dio nel ciel e che premia i suoi fedeli. Su tuo ciglio il pianto io miro, lagrimar così perché no fa cor. No fa cor estremo spiro, l'estremo spiro, lieto e a chi morrà per te. No fa cor estremo
First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis is the birthplace of Congregational Humanism. 4 FUS ministers were signers of Humanist manifestos: John Dietrich, Ray Bragg, Corin Arisian, and Kendall Gibbons. For more than a century, FUS has been at the forefront of Unitarian Universalist humanism and the broader humanist movement. Help us keep the voice of First Unitarian Society strong in these troubled times.
On Sundays when we gather, whether in person or online, we take a few minutes to reflect on the joys, sorrows, and milestones of the human experience. We do this so that we stay in touch with our own humanity. We do this to remind ourselves of the value of a moment of stillness. And we do this so that no one among us is alone, either in celebrating joy or in facing the burdens of life. This morning we have an update from FUS member Maureen Hunt. You might know Maureen personally, or perhaps you know her as a vocalist and flute player in our assemblies. Maureen reports that she had laparoscopic surgery on Tuesday to remove her gallbladder. She says it was an outpatient procedure and not an emergency, and she has been recovering successfully at home. Her husband Dan took 2 days off of work to help her move around, and Buddy, their small dog, has barely left her bedside, and at times has growled at approaching family members, as if to remind them to be gentle with the patient. We are grateful for this good news, and we wish Maureen a speedy and complete recovery. If you'd like to send Maureen some good thoughts, but you don't have her contact information, you can send me an email at jim@firstunitarian.org. We now take a moment of silence to reflect on all the challenges and heartbreak going on in our lives and in our world. We also think with gratitude of those who are doing the hard and sometimes risky work of building a more just, compassionate, and peaceful world. As we come out of the silence, we'll hear our traditional musical response. We invite you to sing along at home or simply listen.
We have our thoughts to receive.
Unitarian Universalism affirms and promotes 7 principles, and we often hear one of those principles as our chalice lighting as we begin our assembly each week. We are also formed and informed by 5 sources, and our documents say it like this: the living tradition we share draws from many sources, including Jewish and Christian teachings, which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. Understanding that some of us are triggered by God language, we congregational humanists are challenged to find innovative and useful ways to engage those Christian and Jewish teachings. Like people who identify as Christian, as UU, as Islamic, as Hindu, Jewish people have a spectrum of beliefs regarding the meaning of the holy, the divine. I follow the organization, the Society for Humanistic Judaism, which celebrates Jewish life while foregoing appeals to divine intervention. Instead, putting faith in human reason and human power as the best vehicles to improve the world. Sounds pretty familiar to our brand of congregational humanism, doesn't it? In my family, my husband is culturally, but not religiously, Jewish, and I have found myself drawn to the history, the stories, the ethical values of Judaism. So today, as we discuss Yom Kippur and what we UU humanists may learn from it, let's do so with an openness of mind that lets us not get stuck on the God or religion part, and that allows us to learn what we can from millennia of people practicing what it means to be in human community together. You may know that the Jewish community, some 14 million people worldwide, is in the midst of the High Holy Days, beginning with Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, and culminating in Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. These 10 days of awe are a time of seeking reconciliation with those whom one may have wronged, making peace with individuals and community, remembering those who have died in the last year, and attuning oneself to humility and a more spiritual life. Yom, day, Kippur, atonement, which begins this evening, is considered the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, the culmination of the introspection begun at Rosh Hashanah. I find it compelling, this spiritual practice, to set aside certain days of the year to reach into this deeply personal work, as the rest of one's community is doing so as well. And I wonder, what would that be like? The English word atone is actually 2 words, at one. To atone is to be at one, in harmony with those I have wronged. When I humble myself in order to make it right, I try to be at one with the other person. Now, in the sense of religious naturalism, as I am a part of nature, I am at one with all of nature. All the universe is woven of one fabric of star stuff. When I act in such ways as to be out of balance with nature, my own, or the nature of healthy relationship, there is an absence of harmony, there's discord. It is for me, it is for each of us to do the spiritual, personal work to make it right. At its core, social justice work is atonement, to be at one with those who are oppressed, with the marginalized, and to bring the marginalized into the center. With whom are we seeking to be at one? Aren't we all one human family? Well, yes, this is so. And while we each have inherent worth and dignity, we are not all treated as such, nor do we all act as such. Certainly, we know that in our human family, especially in this country, our democratic laws are not equally or fairly applied. This week, 65 years to the day after the killers of Emmett Till were acquitted, we learned that the killers of Breonna Taylor will not be charged with her murder. With whom can we be reconciled? With law enforcement or with communities of color who bear the brunt of racist policing? Is it an either-or question? Why not both? With whom will we be reconciled? With those who are afraid for their homes and neighborhoods as racial unrest erupts on our streets? Or with people who have had more than enough of oppression and unfairness and shout, "No more"? Is it an either-or question? With whom will we be reconciled? With those who say the climate crisis is a hoax, that this pandemic that has killed over 200,000 Americans is a hoax, that the results of science are not to be trusted? Or with people who live with the results of catastrophes in the midst of crises, who experience homelessness driven by COVID and blows to our economy, who live with poor air quality, who live and die without health care? Is this an either-or question? This is a deeply spiritual dilemma, and I don't know how to solve it. I do know that this year, with these dichotomies that seem impossible to resolve, to bring into harmony, or to be in at one-ment, these have been the biggest tests of my spiritual commitment, my Unitarian Universalism, my humanism of my life. In my conversations with you, I know that it is true for you as well. So many of you that I've spoken to have named an existential and deeply personal crisis. The only way that I know to be present with tests, with this crisis, is to be present to my own spiritual practices. And you tell me about yours, even if that's not what you call them. They can include talking to others about what's troubling us, talking to others about our joy, attending to the breath, turning off the news, engaging in specific justice activities, making art or music, walking or biking or gardening, cooking, reading, attending to the relationships with people we love, attending to the deep work of justice. Spiritual practices return us to ourselves so that we can do that deep work, so that we can be in right relation. The work of justice is the work of love. And this day of atonement calls us, no matter what divides us, to begin again in love. I want to lift up two beacons of justice that now live in our memories. You know, of course, about the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg last Friday evening. The operatic pieces we are hearing today from our music director, Barb Brooks, and our gifted guest singer, baritone Mark Billy, are a tribute to Justice Ginsburg's love of opera. Thank you, Barb and Mark. These are the words of Karen Moratz, the executive director of Jewish Community Action, speaking last Sunday evening at the vigil for Justice Ginsburg. She died on Erev Rosh Hashanah, just before the new year. She did not join us as we stepped into the year 5781. That's significant. One of our community's beliefs is that only very righteous people die at the very end of the year, because they were needed until the very end. A Jewish colleague wrote on Friday night that I am telling myself RBG felt comfortable, felt able to transition on this Rosh Hashanah because of her faith in us. We needed her for every moment of 5780. She believed in us to carry on her work into 5781. Maratz continues, a final thought. When a Jew dies, we say, may their memory be a blessing. It means that when you think of the person who has passed on, you remember them. When you remember them, may the memory bless you. It's a forward-looking sentiment. It's optimistic and hopeful. We are willing the memories of our loved ones to inspire us and to drive us to carry on their legacies of goodness and justice in the world. The legacy of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg demands nothing less than that her memory should drive us to carry on her fight and to fight for justice for all people. Close quote. The world lost another beacon of justice this week, one with whom you may be less familiar, but whose loss is felt particularly keenly in Unitarian Universalism. Elandria, also known as E. Williams, was a young community activist and change agent who was the former co-moderator of the Unitarian Universalist Association. Williams was the co-founder of the Knoxville, Tennessee Black Lives Matter movement and an organizer of the renowned Highlander Center. E. wrote this about a project called Beautiful Solutions. Resistance is essential, but it's not enough. As we fight the injustice around us, we also have to imagine and create the world we want. We have to build real alternatives in the here and now, alternatives that are not only living proof that things can be done differently, but that actively challenge and eventually supplant the power of the status quo. This is atonement. To build a world in which we can be in harmony, so that the deaths of those who are great, like Justice Ginsburg, and the deaths of those who are famous only because of their death, like Breonna Taylor, are equal in our recognition of their humanity. Let us begin again, each day in love, a fierce, unwavering love for justice, for fairness, for the law equally applied, for our planet, for our country, for our democracy, for each other, for ourselves. May our love be for a blessing and for a revolution.
Join me from home in our Extinguishing the Chalice words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. All of these we carry in our hearts and in our minds until we are together again.
Yevarechecha Adonai, ve'ichmerecha. Yair Adonai, hanovelecha, veichonecho.
Thanks so much for joining us today and sharing your time with us as we consider the subject of renewal. Until we meet again, be fearless, ask questions, hold on to what is good, strengthen the weak, comfort the fearful, serve the suffering, and do what makes you come alive. Because in these troubled times, we need more people who have come alive. Rejoice in the power of the human spirit. So may it be.
Thanks for listening. You can find much more about humanism and what's happening at First Unitarian Society in Minneapolis by visiting our website at firstunitarian.org.